And then I have just a laundry list of all of the questions that are asked in most grant proposals. And you can see that and read that for yourself. I don't need to go through this. But typically, this is what grant proposals require or have required in the past. So you can see that this is a very different way of getting money than going out to lunch with a donor. Okay? But then if you go to lunch with a donor, you have to ask them for money, and a lot of people have that aversion to asking for money. But it is part of our culture, and it is natural to do that. It's just that there are two real kinds of people. Some that are good at asking on paper and providing evidence and proof and documenting everything, which is demonstrated by this long list of requirements, or being an extrovert and going out to lunch and feeling confident about their organization and asking for money. It's two different things. This is more, I guess, the scholarly approach. Okay, applicant protocol. Treat the funder like a client or an investor. Communicate. I communicate a lot with people that I'm working with in terms of grants. They know me by the end of the relationship. And it's usually a really, mutually beneficial, because they would like to get a proposal that's fundable. They don't want to have to waste anybody's time with something that's not. If they invite you to something, go. It's funny, a lot of people just don't get it. They don't connect the dots that it's all about relationships. Life really is just about relationships and about your stories. And so, not to get too philosophical here, don't ever get defensive. I was called by a funder who knew I had a relationship with this organization who applied for funding. And I was asked by the funder, do you think you could get them to stop? Could you get them to stop calling us? Could you just tell them to go away? Because they are defensive about the fact that we don't want to fund them. And we can't politely anymore tell them that they're not eligible, that their project is not fundable, and that we're not interested anymore in their idea. So I was the mediator to call the organization and tell them, you are not entitled to these funds. For some reason, and I'll explain why, they thought that they were entitled to be funded. And the reason is that they didn't know the kind of money that this money was. The money came from the sale of a hospital. It was a nonprofit hospital. So that was private money that bought this hospital. It was channeled into a foundation. That foundation is a private foundation. For some reason, the applicant organization thought that this money belonged to the community. It was a private business deal that sold the hospital. That money became private money. It was private money from the beginning. Yes, it was in their community, but this group had no entitlement to that money. And therefore, they didn't have to have, they weren't entitled to any explanation as to why they weren't being funded. Yes, you are entitled to an explanation of why you weren't funded if it's government money, but not if it's private money. You will not normally get any feedback about what was wrong with your proposal, and nor are you entitled to that feedback because it's private money. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see. Okay, that's the end of this presentation. Any questions about the basics of grant writing? Yes.
You mentioned that grant writers can be reimbursed after the fact, and I think I've seen some as, they might not be official as in passing, where they're asking for a grant writer and they're saying where you'll get reimbursed depending on whether the grant is funded or not?
That is highly unethical and is viewed by certification associations in my field very negatively. You cannot, in all honesty, take a percentage of the amount awarded as payment for your services.
Okay, and also connected to that, you mentioned that's one thing that's restricted, and also you said food was restricted. Is there anything else that becomes like red flags to reviewers?
Anything requested prior to the grant period. You cannot ask for funding to recoup expenses that you've already expended. They have to be new expenses that have not occurred yet and will not occur until the award is made. You cannot go backwards. That's a big mistake that people don't understand. That there's a lot of overhead with doing this work, and you just have to eat it and keep it as an overhead expense. And
What?
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are some of the organizations that certify and, set best practice standards and things like that? Like the AAM for museums?
You would have to look it up. I don't belong to any of them.
Okay.
Except for when I was a consultant, the state of Florida requires that you hold a solicitation license. So I have one now from my company because I still have a consulting practice. And for every contract that I get, I send it to the state. It's part of the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. They review the contract to make sure that it meets the Florida state guidelines, and they see that there's a signature from the organization and myself that we're agreeing to do this, and it's for a flat fee. Yeah, sometimes it can say commission, and I think they will accept it, but it's frowned upon by grant writing associations, etc., and by the funder. If the funder knew that it was a percentage off the top, they wouldn't fund it. It's kind of like a very dishonest way of doing business. Yes.
In your sample attachments, you have a letter of support.
Yes.
Who does the letter of support?
Okay, there's a few kinds of letters that you can attach, but you have to find out if it's acceptable to attach them. Okay? So a letter of commitment is from a partnering organization that agrees to do XYZ for the project. Commits so much amount of time, etc., or facilities, or facility use, or marketing, or whatever. A letter of support is usually from someone who's going to be benefiting from from your project. So for instance, you want to submit an arts and education proposal from your museum. Who's your audience? Teachers. You're going to be training teachers to come through with their classrooms to your exhibits. You want letters of support from teachers that say, I will bring my students to this, and the reason I believe this is important to fund is X. This is why it's important, and this is why it's important to my students, or this is why it's important to me as a professional teacher. This is what I hope to gain from this. Those letters should not be written by the person that writes the proposal, because then they all look the same. And I've seen proposals where every single letter of support is exactly the same with a different signature and a different letterhead. It means the grant writer wrote all the letters of support and then sent them out and everybody signed them. Funders are done with that. You send the supporter a list of questions, 3 questions maximum, 2 questions maybe, with the abstract of the description of the project, and ask them, in your own words, could you address these questions? And they will. And then you have, from their own minds, why this is important. Anything else? Yes.
How is it different, like, with being a consultant and actually working in the museum as a grant writer? Because I know you mentioned, like, a big part of being a grant writer is knowing the whole structure of the museum and all that. So how does that work when a consultant comes in?
You need a really good consultant. And the consultant's first job is to learn the organization and learn everything about the organization and everything about the people and the assets of the organization. But the benefit of having an outside consultant is it's cheaper, and you're only paying for the time that you need for these proposals, right? As opposed to paying a full-time person, right? But the other benefit is that they're working with other organizations, and those organizations can be partners. And a piece of that person's time is being paid by 5 people. So it just is a win-win situation for everyone. And if that person stays for a long period of time, you're paying less money overall because you're not paying the full salary of the person, because most institutions don't write grants 100% of the time. Because if they did, their people would be up in arms. They wouldn't be able to do their normal work because there would be too many projects coming in the door and they can't handle it. So then if this consultant pieces it out that way, then many people are paying for that consultant's salary. Nobody's paying the benefits. Really, that person's paying their own benefits for health, et cetera, 30%. So if you have an employee, it's just not very cost effective. And you want the consultant to stay for a long period of time. So should I give you some stories and should I show you some proposals? Or do you want me to leave?
No, the proposals are always great.
Okay. Okay, so this is a proposal to American Express. And we're asking for, you always put the amount right up front if it's a letter, you know? And I always, you know, this is as our formal request for $16,800 in the first paragraph. And then we explain what it is. Here's the project description. We're bringing in this exhibit from Japan. Here are the exhibit dates. This is a description of the exhibit. This is who we plan to serve and who we normally serve. This is what's going to happen during the grant period. Yes?
Obviously, well, where did all of these categories come from? Are these from the granting? Is this from
American Express is a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
They will give you minimal amount of guidelines, and you have to be smart and know how to put together a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my influence on the proposal, the categories. The benefits to the community, some of these come from the guidelines, but some of them are my categories. Just comes from experience. Programs, how are we going to, how do we evaluate programs?
Can I also point out how to everybody, one, that the titles are bolded, so you don't have to think about it. They jump out at you, and they're short.
Yes. And then here's the very simple budget. I think it's 3 pages total, the maximum that you can have in a corporate in this guidelines. So we didn't have a lot of room, but you see everything is very specific. Number of hours, correct? How did we figure out this table? Then we have these very simple 5 columns on top. In kind means cost share, means that's the time that we're contributing. That's the money that we're matching. That's matching money. But it's not, it's in-kind support. We are contributing these hours, these dollars. So it's called in-kind contributions, and in academia, it's called cost share. So if I'm going to spend 50% of my time on this, the state pays me my salary. And 50% of my time is going to go to the project. That's cost share, 50% of my time, which is, who knows how much money. Yes?
This may be a really obvious question, but when it says like 750 volunteer hours at $10 an hour,
Yes.
how are volunteer hours paid? With the
This is, no, they're not paid,
Okay.
They're in kind.
Okay.
And we
Okay.
know that they're worth $10 an hour because the county has provided the cost per hour for volunteers who volunteer at nonprofit organizations. So that's the whole proposal. Usually a corporate proposal is really short, and we have to give something, right? Remember, give, get, corporate. So we gave them, and to reserve up to, so we're going to give 100 complimentary invitations to attend the exhibit opening that has food connected to it, and 25 complimentary seats for each of the theatrical dance performances at the Morikami. For their corporate guests. You have to give something back in a corporate proposal. Okay, let me go to another one. Is that okay? I'm gonna close this, because I have a bunch of them here. Look. I wanna show you a checklist. Okay, before I do any proposals, I make a checklist of all the required elements. And the checklist also reflects questions that if I answered them, would address the criteria for evaluation. Most people forget to look at the criteria for evaluating proposals. So a reviewer gets a box of grants or gets the grants file, and they are given the 4 criteria by which to evaluate the proposal. Don't you want the evaluation criteria to be addressed in your proposal? If you don't, they will evaluate you on what you haven't written. So, this is just an example of everything that's required, and it's not a very good example because it doesn't really give the criteria here. This is an old one. I was running out of time and getting ready. Maybe there's another example here. There's an example on the grants research page, resources page of the library. This one is interesting. This is an application to the Freeman Foundation. This is what kind of funder? Private. Freeman Foundation ended up with too much money at the end of the year that they had to get rid of. Otherwise, they were going to be taxed by the IRS. They put out a call to all of these museums, Asian museums, because they fund Asian topics. And they said, we will entertain a proposal from you. No guidelines, no specifications, no questions to answer, no idea of how much money to ask for. They had never done this before. We had no idea what to ask for, how much to ask for. So we guessed. We asked for $380,000 or something, $340,000 to create, market, and implement a virtual Japanese museum project. So, how do I get to the internet from here? Can I go here?
I'm silent on this one.
Is it, oh, here we go. Whoa. That's hard. Voila!
This is the grant.
This is the result. There's over 1,000 objects. So if you click on this, it takes you here, and it gives you everything about the object. So 1,000 objects in their permanent collection are now available to the general public at no cost. Isn't that cool? I'm really proud of this. I mean, we had no idea even how to do this. This was, a long time ago, before virtual museums, before digital collections were popular. And it was even hard to find a consultant who would actually do this for us. But look, it was an idea. We guessed at how much money. They said, sure, we'll give you $340,000. They sent the check. They were so happy.
You said we should ask for 5?
Well, we did say, why didn't we ask for more? But,
Yeah.
to a certain degree, it's a high-risk behavior.
Yeah.
This is an example of a grants calendar. So it's for the Morikami Museum, and this gives you an idea of kind of what we asked for the purpose, was the deadline hard or soft? When was it submitted, and what was the result? This is a very useful tool. This is all my work.
Wow, you were busy.
Yes. And see, it's in consulting, it wasn't that much money, so I think, I didn't charge them more than $30,000 a year for all this work. And look at how much money they got.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
It was a good decision on their part.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if I have some more stuff to show you. This is an interesting one.
Did you work exclusively for them for those years?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I had other grant writing clients, but I also do facilitation, group facilitation. I also do a speed dating process that I invented for large groups. So foundations or United Way would have me come in and do facilitation work, strategic planning work. So I have pages and pages of my other contracts. But they were my favorite one. My favorite. Okay, so this proposal is very creative because the most creative projects put two things together that have the least amount in common. Okay? So if you put two things together like the FAU College of Nursing and the Morikami Museum of and Japanese Gardens, you would think, well, what do those two entities have in common and how could they do anything together? And the answer is, we could do a study on the deliberate attendance at museums and its ability to reduce depression, especially in seniors, because the baby boomer community is getting older and they're going to be seniors soon, and the biggest issue with seniors is depression. And there aren't enough, the cost of dealing with depression, because there's so many different causes, and if attending a museum reduces depression, then that would be a good thing for a doctor to prescribe, wouldn't you think? So 3 visits per week. So all you have to do is get a membership to a museum. So what could that be? $30, $50 a year, and you're a member and you show up at the museum, 3 times a week, and you feel better? So this was a proposal to the Institute of Museum and Library Services called The Effect of Museum Attendance on Elders with Depression. And this is the proposal. These are the audiences. These are the needs on the left and the benefits on the right per audience group. Here's the narrative. This is the national impact. This is the project evaluation, the participants. These are the 3 groups we were going to have. This is what each group was going to be doing, so you could compare one group to another. So one group was going to just be in a classroom doing art therapy. One group was going to have guided imagery in the gardens, and the other one was going to just show up and do whatever they wanted. And we did find that the groups that were in the gardens did much better than the group that was just in the classroom. So this is equivalent work. I'm really proud of this because it says the person on the team, who the person is, how much time per year, and what their role will be. And it's very easy to read. And this goes on, but we got it. Yes. And it was $125,000, and it was the first time the Morikami had ever gotten an IMLS grant. And so it was really a big deal.
And how important was the evaluation piece of that? We've just been reading a lot about philanthropy and how increasingly evaluation has become crucial.
So United Way is really, we should credit United Way for making evaluation such a big deal. They went along with this outcomes management system. And because all the United Ways adopted this outcomes management system, it then trickled down to everybody.
Including grant writer, including grant
for anything.
Okay,
Grants for anything. So United Way used it to evaluate its grants, and then it became part of most every grant. State, federal, private grants are all also looking for outcomes, results, evaluation results.
but I'm curious, I was sort of, not very eloquently, obviously, asking how important do you think as a piece of the grant, the evaluation is? In other words, are you gonna get the grant because you have a really interesting way to evaluate it?
No.
Are you not gonna get the grant because they don't, the evaluation is weak?
Yes.
Okay,
You will, both of those are true.
okay,
So,
so it's an interest
most,
part.
most organizations do very poorly on their evaluations.
Mhm.
And the ones that do well usually get funded. But if it's a poor idea and it doesn't make sense and you have a great evaluation, it's not gonna help.
So how did this evaluation end up? Because we've talked a lot about how difficult it is to capture an outcome from somebody going to a museum. This is a little
Right.
different because it is nice and specific.
Well, because you have nurses
Right.
in charge and they do, and this is part of their research. So whenever you're working, if you can find someone in your institution who understands research and has done some research, then that's very, very helpful. There are ways of measuring anything. You can measure anything. It just takes man hours to do it and methods that don't create barriers for people to actually participate in that evaluation. Now you can do so much electronically if you have an email address, etc. Do I have to stop?
Pretty soon.
Okay. This is what an abstract looks like. It's just a one-page summary of, this is the same project.
And let me point out the bullet points. I mean, all of this, you've said it, but it's nice to see it. I mean, how
You have to
there's
see it.
business about how easy it has to be to read these things.
Yes, you
And
have
that
to
always
see it.
pays off.
I quickly, here's another budget, 4 columns. As much as possible, whenever they're not giving you a form, do it very simply. This was a really interesting project about a residency program. So just to go down the list of types of projects that you can apply for, general operating support, tourism development, community development, international cultural exchange, artists in residency programs, scientists in residency programs, digital museum collections, challenge grants. A challenge grant says, if we raise $3, you will give us $1 for every $3 we raise. And the NEH has challenge grants, and that's the criteria, and you can ask for up to $500,000. So that's a big deal that you could get $500,000 simply by raising funds for a project that they're interested in. And I got one of those, and that was really exciting. And library museum collaborations, and we just did one for the Harn. So we submitted a collaborative planning grant to, with the library and the Harn, to inventory all of the Asian collections in the state of Florida, and to create an Excel searchable database that all the curators in all these museums would be able to see who has what, and be able to create new exhibits, and be able to loan, and be able to learn more and promote more about Asian art in Florida. So that was my idea. That's because I come from the museum world and I understand libraries. Yeah. So, any questions? I think I should wrap up. I want to show you the site that we have for the library. So if you go to, so how do I get to the, if I go home, and then how do I get to the library from here? Academics,
Well,
libraries,
right there.
down at the bottom,
To the right.
to the right, libraries, yes, university libraries. I want George Mather's library. Okay, main page, under using the libraries, grant resources. This is our page. Suchi is now my graduate student in charge of working with me on this page. And you will find, I can give you an example of a checklist. So all of these are links, and over here you have lots of links as well to fellowships, fellowship grants, and their deadlines. We give you a description, the deadline, how much is available, and a little project description, and this goes on for 29 pages. Okay, and you can search it just here. You can search by keyword and put in a keyword here. So if you put in arts,
Can you put in graduate? I mean, in other words, could I limit this
Oh.
search by grants that were available to graduate students as opposed to faculty?
or, it's mixed.
Okay,
Yeah, but you can search under that term. So here we have art and artifacts that broadly illustrates, so this is the Nantucket Historical Association Fellowship. They give, and here's another one that's Rich Diversity of Human Culture and Book Awards, Extraordinary Art and Culture Peoples. That's one resource that we give you. I wanted to show you a checklist. Here's my checklist for this NSF funding. And it gives all the criteria for how it's evaluated. So you can use this site. If you want to look at past awards and past applications, did you see the button I just clicked? Up here, past awards on the top left. Click here and you have our grant applications. Here you go. And you can go next, and let's go last. We make our applications entirely transparent, so anything the libraries has applied for is here in this database. So you can see these are all of our applications. If you want to see examples of good proposals that were awarded, you can come here and look as much as you want. And I think we better see here we have digital collections in Asian studies. And the most recent one, what was it? This was another one that we did recently. This was great. An aerial photography project.
right there is Harn. Is that the one you're looking for? Connecting
Yeah.
Florida's Asian collections to,
This is it
Yep.
right here. Helios. There's a lot of stuff in, that was the abstract. That's the budget. How come that's all that's in there? Oh,
page
Well-
80?
there are lots of pages in there. Well, why isn't it here? I'll have to ask her. I'm not sure why it's up, not coming up. There it is. Nope. Some of these are
It
blank.
just cuts out.
Oh, there we are. So you can check this out. I think we did a really great job. Here's the phases, and we're asking for phase 2. And what we want is to pay for a full-time person to do this work for a year. To go to all the museums, to work with all the curators, to find out who's using what management systems, to then infuse all of their, it's about 10,000 items, into a giant spreadsheet, and then be able to search it. And then we would put it up on the digital libraries page. So, questions? It was really a pleasure. I'm sorry that I took so long with explaining this, but I would like another week with you all, and then everybody would.
Be careful what you wish for.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.